Okay, we are back. I am sorry about that. I am going to try to stitch these two videos together in some way. If I can't, then this is gonna be a two-parter. And that's not a terrible situation, is it? So where was I? We were talking about Kazuo and the weapons. It's what set this book apart from everything else is the fact that they armed them. And then it is the way that these characters are, for the most part, static characters. Takami said so himself. They are presented as stand ins for different aspects of society, but also personality types within that. You have the individuals who want to help people, the individuals who want to harm people, the bullies, the cowards, the strangely enough, courageous ones who come out of nowhere and really do well. I'm not going to be able to remember every story beat in this entire book, but I'm going to do my best to give you the play by play. So, we have Shuya and Noriko. They meet up shortly after making it out, and very quickly, the two are attacked by an individual with a hatchet. Before that happens, right when they escape, Shuya has an interaction with an individual who has a crossbow, and he is shooting people as they come out of the school because this kid, who is bullied for being overweight and geeky, is pretty well hook, line, and sinker bought into the fact that he's going to win this game. And this is the best way to do it because he can just win the game by standing here and doing this. As people come out, he shoots them. He's already shot one. Well, the individuals make it away, and the person with the crossbow dies horribly. So Shuya and Noriko meet up, and they are joined by Shogo. There are other plot lines happening. I'm not going to ruin them all. They're all very well done. I'm just going to tell you the Shuya Noriko storyline with Shogo and Kazuo. Now, Kazuo, he gets out, and he meets his lackeys, and they've convinced one of the girls to go with them, and you feel like it's almost going to get sickening very quickly in the way that some Japanese media does tend to do. And that does tie into the culture around sex in Japan and sexual promiscuity, but also sexuality in general. Post World War II, and we have to do an aside here, everybody, I apologize, but post World War II, we're going to talk about the pornography laws of Japan. They had very strict pornography laws. They were not allowed to show things such as, penetration, for instance. How do they get around that? Also, they're not allowed to show real people. Well, you can draw people, and instead of showing penetration, you can insinuate it. And of course, you're not allowed to draw a penis. So instead of that, you're going to draw tentacles. And we have, in a nutshell, gone full circle into tentacle porn. Now, that increases over time. And that's how we get to the modern hentai scene in Japan. We're not going to go any farther into that specific subject. But it is important to at least touch upon it so that you see the connection between the violence and the animation, the cartoonish nature, and sexuality of Japan. Once you bake that in, starting in 1950, all the way up into this is decades of individuals that are building upon each other's work. And that's why, to us, a book, and even to them, the Battle Royale book of teenagers killing each other is absolutely absurd. It was offensive, disgusting, and I want to say it was the head of public safety in Japan who called for a crackdown on violent video games and media in general that was completely without art. But Japan also brought us Ichi the Killer. And you can, in the description down below, Japan brought us Meatball Machine. If you even know what Meatball Machine is, hats off to you. If you don't know what Meatball Machine is, don't Google it. It's just in a nutshell, I don't... Look, man, if you thought Saw was bad, Saw is the PG-13 version of Meatball Machine. Saw is E for everyone, okay? Because Meatball Machine is it's something I watched at a far too young age. I think I was 19. Whew. But it is a cult classic. It is a Japanese first movie, and I've never seen, and when I say that, Japanese first movie, I mean it is steeped in the culture of that country and those decades built up of that animation and that kind of compressed, what is the correct terminology for whenever the repression of needs and wants. So then we have Kazuo. I say all of that to bring in Kazuo Kiriyama, who is our sociopathic madman. Kazuo comes up to that two guys who have the girl, and they're like, "Hey, boss, we do this, yeah, you know." And Kazuo says, "Flip a coin." And Kazuo decides if it's heads, he's going to play the game. And if it's tails, he's going to overthrow the government. It came up heads. So Kazuo takes out a submachine gun and kills all three individuals there. He's not interested in taking pleasure in anything. He has decided to play this game. And he just got 3 extra duffel bags with 3 extra weapons. And that's a benefit. Now, we go back to Shuya, Noriko, and Shogo. They hear a loudspeaker. Someone has a megaphone. That was one of the weapons given to them. Now you might be thinking, a megaphone? What could that be used for? How is this useful? Kind of like the fork. The fork is just they just gave that to you because you're supposed to die, essentially. It does not have a function. It is to make you one of the victims. The megaphone can be used to bait individuals, which is probably what it will be used for later on. I don't believe it comes back up, but it attracts Shuya, Noriko. It also attracts Shogo. This is how they meet Shogo, I do believe. But it attracts Kazuo. Kazuo shows up and just murders the people there and attempts to murder our heroes who make it out. Shogo shows them how to set up trip lines with cans to alert them if somebody's coming up in the night. And they spend their first night in the woods, scared and alone. Now, we also have the Mitsuko Soma. She meets another one of the girls, and she pretends to cry, and she's been given a scythe. And she breaks down, and the girl's like, "Oh, no, it's okay." And the girl's been given a taser, and she goes, "I'm so sorry, I thought you were coming here to kill me." And she's like, "I just want to be with somebody." And about that time, she stabs her in the back of the neck. And if you want the true brutality of this series told out to you in real time, I would suggest the manga, because it's absolutely brutal. It goes into Mitsuko's backstory a little bit. Mitsuko. And it tells you about some of the trauma which happened to her earlier on in life, how she turned some of the other girls in her class into, for lack of a better term, ladies of the night, prostitutes. These are, again, teenagers, junior high school teenagers. And Mitsuko is off the rails. My apologies. My throat's getting rough. I've been reading a lot today, or talking. So we have Mitsuko, who has killed her first individual and gotten the taser, and she will continue to kill individuals over time using her sexuality against her fellow students. Now, in the meantime, we have a side plot of the athletic man with his, the athlete with his jokester friend, class clown friend. The manga, again, absolutely brutal when it comes to telling you about these individuals and their backstory. A scene I can never forget is a bully holds him down and then puts his fingers back like that, and then takes his foot and steps on them and snaps each one of the fingers one by one that way. Can you even fathom that? I can't. I just like that scorched itself into my brain as one of possibly the worst bullying. Isn't it interesting how in books and things, bullies are always next level? Like in all of Stephen King's novels, bullies are like taking out knives and carving people's names in their chest. I don't think that happens, man. I was bullied quite a bit. I never had a bully pull a knife on me. I don't know. So, everyone will meet a grisly end. Period. As the game continues, Shuya is separated from Noriko and Shogo. Shuya is found by a group of girls who have banded together in a lighthouse. I have jumped ahead pretty much the entire central part of this book to the end game. So Shuya is in the lighthouse, and these girls are working together. The only problem is that one of the girls does not trust Shuya. They don't trust Shuya just because they saw Shuya, and then they saw the people with the megaphone, and then the megaphone people died. So they're making a connection between Shuya and the megaphone people and death. Or perhaps they saw Shuya kill somebody else. This is called Movies Misremembered for a reason, guys. So, she poisons Shuya's food. The only downside is, and that was her weapon. She got poisoned. The only downside is, the other people eat the food. So now, these people are vomiting up blood. And nobody knows who to trust. It just descends into chaos. And it's probably a statement upon, and I don't want to say this book has, themes to it, and you could write a thesis paper about it. You totally could. I might do a much longer form video about this once I get some editing chops down. But in essence, the concept is that this was a self-contained society that was working together to accomplish a goal. And then it was destroyed from the inside once a new element was introduced, even though the new element was not, on its face, Shuya in this instance, violent or disruptive at all. It's just the way people perceive things to be. Prejudices brought to the table which can dismantle and destroy something beautiful. And it did. And their entire little group fell apart very quickly. Shuya makes it back to Noriko and Shogo. We are now entering endgame times. Now we must talk about the geeks and the nerds. The geeks and the nerds have a plan. They're going to hack the government, and they are going to then bomb the elementary school that the government is in. I just said those two words together. That's this book, not me. This book right here, Battle Royale. This crazy nutso book, 1999. Not a nutso book. The book's a gem, man. Book's an absolute gem. So they're going to do this, and it's because that's where the government has set up their basically control center, where they can flip the switches and make people's collars explode. We remember about the collars around their necks. So they go to do it, but who gets in their path but Kazuo? And Kazuo is now very well armed. And the long and the short of it is, they do not survive that interaction with Kazuo. So I do believe the bomb goes off, but in the wrong place. And now there's just this giant beacon for them to go to. We're down to 4 survivors: Shuya, Noriko, Shogo, Kazuo. Now, a point happens a little earlier on, and I think Takami was making... It is Takami, right? Let me double check his name. Yes, Takami. He was making a bit of a point with these two characters because they get together and they just don't want to play the game. They don't want to die and they don't want to kill. And so they just fall off a cliff in each other's arms. And the concept there is there will be people, because what he's doing is he's boiling down basically society into these 40-odd kids thrown into this classroom, is that there are some individuals who will be passive, and they will let the game happen to them, much like some of the girls in the lighthouse were being. There are some individuals who will actively try to resist the game, much like the geeks and nerds. There's going to be some individuals who are actively participating. Kazuo, Mitsuko. Then there are individuals who are probably, and we'll call them the Omega Few, who, in my mindset, won the game on their terms by taking themselves out of it. And perhaps that's not the correct mindset to have towards this. But if you think about it, with 40 individuals, the chances of surviving just randomly are 2.5%. And that's denoting that you have to, at some point, take a human life. So if you're not willing to do that, which I don't think I'd ever be willing to do that, then you understand that you're going to be there to be taken. And there are individuals like Kazuo who are doing the taking. And it's messed up. So, we get all the way to the Final Four. Before the Final Four really occur, Mitsuko has her final moment when she tries to seduce Kazuo. I want to say it was Kazuo. And Kazuo essentially just kills her, because she has made herself such a convenient target by attempting to seduce him. He has no interest in being seduced. He is a cold, calculating individual. Kazuo is probably, for lack of a better term in this story, capitalism. He is a train that is going on a track in one direction with the force of 1,000 horses. And nothing's going to stop him but a derailment. Well, lucky us, the derailment has a name. Shuya, Noriko, Shogo. So, after a car chase and an extremely badass scene where, especially in the movie, Kazuo emerges from the crashed truck with a shotgun, or he has the machine gun, Shogo has the shotgun, just shooting at him. And it's beautifully well done. He gets shot multiple times, but he has a bulletproof vest. And that's not how bulletproof vests work. In no way could it take a shotgun blast unless some of the grains were taken out of that shotgun shell. Like, let's just be honest. And I wouldn't put it past the people who did this to dumb down all firearms to be less lethal. Strictly because the point of this game is to not make the deaths quick. It's to make the parents of these children understand that the deaths were brutal and slow and painful. And you suffered them because one of you did something wrong against the government. And everyone else, my theory is Shuya's father, because Shuya's father was murdered by the government for speaking out against them, he might be the reason they're all on this island. That's my thought. That's my theory. All of the other parents of, school-aged children, they have to learn the same thing. So, Kazuo inevitably dies, killed by Shogo. And then Shogo turns to Shuya and Noriko. And then over the microphones, yeah, they're all microphoned, they hear the people back at HQ, Shogo tell them, "You should have known better than to trust me." And then shotgun blasts. And their collars go away. Now, earlier in the book, we learned that Shogo has been playing around with a way to unlock the collars. Once he got out of the game, he found this online. And I think he might have known that he would be back in the game at some point. Or he had planned to do something along those lines. So he knew how to take the collars off. So he disconnects Shuya and Noriko's collars. Now they're collarless. Shogo has been shot by Kazuo. So he is slowly succumbing to his injuries. But he gets on the ship with the demented teacher, who's congratulating him for a job well done. Shogo ends up overpowering and killing the teacher and some soldiers when Shuya and Noriko show up, just in time for Shogo to pass away from his injuries. And Shuya and Noriko then go back to mainland Japan, and they go on the run. Now, in the book, they basically make a plan that they're going to run away to democratic America. In the movie, it ends with them getting spotted and being chased in mainland Japan, and that's where it is. Now we're going to talk about the fallout of all this. Shogo's sacrifice. Kazuo just demonically going after them the way Kazuo did. Shuya and Noriko being our hero and final girl. The entire concept of this. The Mitsuko. The story in a way that is presented to give you a deeper depth and understanding of not just Japanese culture, but the woes, the screaming indignities of the Japanese youth at this time in the 90s. In the 1980s, I do believe Japan was going through a horrible recession. That's when Takami came of age and got his job and started working. And this was a very bad time in Japan. It came after a very good time, which was basically a real estate bubble. If you are over the age of 30, then 2008 should have, rang a bell for you when I said real estate bubble, because it happened right here in America as well. And it's interesting that their dream of a better life is to escape to democratic America. That's America's always been viewed, and even in this book, in this horrible context, as a bastion, a safe place. And yet we're coming up on a time and place where we have legitimately had world leaders who have just been reelected, God help us all, state that they want some kind of immigration fight island where they fight amongst themselves and the person who wins gets citizenship. Did Donald Trump just explain Battle Royale to you? Because I think he did. Do you think he would care if they beat each other to death on that island? I don't think so. How many individuals have died in the UFC ring? Probably none, but my gut instinct would say at least a few, and they're still doing UFC. It's got to have happened. I have watched people's legs break in half, personally, watching UFC fights, seen their bones splinter out of their feet, and that dude, he continued his fight. He won it. These people, they're not down there for your entertainment, beating the ever-loving shit out of each other. They're doing it for money. They could care less about you. You're a byproduct of the money. And these kids are killing each other because there is no alternative. Because that's the only path they've been given. And the ones who don't will fall victim to and succumb to the Mitsukos or the Kazuas of the class. There's always one or two individuals. And you see, Mitsuko tries to do it her own way. Uses the skills that have been given to her. But she's overestimating the success factor therein every time. Just because it works 7 times in a row doesn't mean it's going to work the 8th. Kazuo knows full well what works every single time until it doesn't, and he doesn't care if it doesn't work because he'll be dead. And that's, you just use the weapons at your disposal to the nth degree. Shuya, Noriko, Shogo, they do the bloody and hard work of going through all the stages of grief until they just have to accept that this is happening. And they do. And they escape. 2 people survive in the very end. And that is Battle Royale. That spawned everything. Now, we're going to talk a little bit, true crime, about the inspiration of Battle Royale. The Kobe murders. I'm going to need some tea for this, but it's going to be well worth it. 1997. A child's, 10-year-old's, disembodied head was found at the front gates of an elementary school in Japan. Inside the disembodied head's mouth was a note. And the note said, "Now the game begins." And then it went on to say a lot of other crazy stuff. Then it misspelled Shool Killer, Shool, killer, in English. This was all done by a 14-year-old who was later convicted of a second murder and a bunch of other assaults against girls that he committed. This 14-year-old had been raised in Japan and had shown these classic signs of mentally bent behavior, such as beheading pigeons, running over frogs with his bicycle, torturing cats. I mean, these are the classic golden oldies of a serial killer of America. These are just the things that a serial killer does when they're younger. Now, this individual was arrested at the age of 14, turned 15 2 weeks later. Again, the disembodied head of a 10-year-old, special needs, even though that's not as important as disembodied head of a child, but it does make it slightly worse because I'm sure the child was much more trusting. But even that, I mean, just Jesus, man. They attempted to connect the Battle Royale to the Kobe child murders. Takami, I do not believe, ever clearly said one way or the other whether or not it was encouraging, but Now the Game Begins is such a cold and shocking thing to find written in a disembodied head of anyone, but also a child. The individual was released from prison at 21 years old. After 1 year of being monitored, completely released from parole. It's baffling because this individual, if there is an individual that is the basically blueprint for Kazuo, would be Azuma, which is the name of the individual who murdered that child, another child, and assaulted other girls. It does not go into greater detail. Now, if you read the Japanese book, Those Who Eat Darkness, which is a book about one of Japan's most notorious serial killers, it lets you see behind the scenes of how the police in Japan operated at the time of the 1990s. And how they operated at the time of the 1990s, they brought this guy in and they asked, "Did you murder these people?" And the guy said, "No." And they let the guy go. Because you just tell the truth, right? Doesn't everybody? Yeah, pretty much. When you're questioned by police, you'll just be honest. Even when they knew that there was a body of the girl on the beach in a little cave, there is a conspiracy theory that the police didn't find the body until well after the fact because they kept asking the guy. And they wanted him to tell them where the body was so that they could use that against him. In his room, they found videotape after videotape after videotape of women who were basically, and they've proven it in the book, being drugged and videotaped with what you know is happening. And yet, because none of them were clearly dead at the time, and because none of them were ever found again to be questioned, what are we even talking about here? And that's because they do have a bit of a tendency to discount foreigners, and particularly foreign women for whatever reason. Probably also foreign men, but I think foreign women more than not. The book delved deep into it in great detail. And when I say they, I mean the police of Japan at the time in the 90s. And it's because the idea was that they were transitional individuals. They were going to come in, they were going to leave. It wasn't Japan's problem. And the crazy thing is that that concept is the insular concept is breaking down, I think, in a much wider sense across many different boundaries in modern day life. We are no longer locked geographically. I can get on my computer and see what's happening in India right now. I can see what's going on my brother has been seeing videos, supposedly, of the Ukrainian front lines. And it's like, we can go anywhere through our computers. We are no longer locked to one single geographic location. But what happens when we are? What happens when we're locked to that geographic location? And then that geographic location slowly and systemically closes in on us, zone by zone, turning into one left. A game of Fortnite, always shrinking, with the understanding that at the end, only one can remain alive. What you get is Battle Royale. What you get is enemies befriending enemies and friends betraying friends. What you get is a bit of a masterpiece. And it is shocking. Thank you so much for coming back here to Books Misremembered, Movies Misremembered. My final fun fact is that this is the Kill Bill... What is his name? I completely blanked on his name. The individual who wrote Kill Bill. This is his favorite book. I'm talking about Pulp Fiction. Quentin Tarantino. Thank you. This is his favorite movie. Not his favorite book, but his favorite movie. And he is an individual who knows movies. So the fact that this is his favorite movie should tell you something about it. Go check it out. Look in the description down below for all the affiliate links. Tune in next time for whatever I want to talk about. And if you have any books you want me to check out, let me know. I've tried 19Q2. That's an interesting novel. I haven't made it all the way through it, but perhaps one day I will do a story on that. And I've also tried not The Grudge. What is the book called where it's about the well in the basement? The Ring. The novelization of The Ring is off the rails different. I mean, it's borderline apocalyptic because it's a trilogy and it's baffling. So we might dive into that at a later date. I think my next one's gonna be Horror Movie the Novel. I'm gonna do a longer version of that. I need to go ahead and order the book so I can do that. So as always, bye y'all. It was good to see you. Thanks for tuning in.